Good afternoon for all of those coming in. We'll begin in just a few minutes. We'll give folks enough time to get in the room, and we'll begin right at 12. So thank you all for coming and joining us, and we'll begin shortly. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Heroes of History, our Black Heritage in Texas webinar series. From Texas independence to the race to Mars, African Americans have been shaping Texas history for centuries. Today, we are joined by representatives of some amazing heritage destinations across the state to showcase stories of outstanding bravery, caring for one's community, and we, the public, have the opportunity to celebrate and continue to support those celebrations of the impact of Texans that they have made not only on Black history, but Texas history. My name is Andrea Barefield, and I'm the Executive Director for the Texas Brazos Trail Region, which is part of the Texas Heritage Trail Program. This webinar is sponsored by the Texas Historical Commission. The Texas Historical Commission is a state agency for historic preservation, and the agency's Texas Heritage Trail Program encourages visitation to cultural and historic sites, such as the ones represented here today. We will hear from amazing historians, curators, and leaders of these organizations, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to get the questions that you have asked. So please note, whatever manner of device you're using, either at the top or the bottom, there is a Q&A feature. So as the speakers go through and you have questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. We will do our best to get to as many of them as we can. Joining with me today are Ms. Doreen Ravenscroft with the Doris Miller Museum, Sandra Tumberlinson with Callandritt Black History Museum, Louis Padilla with TPWD Buffalo Soldiers, Larry Callies with the Black Cowboy Museum, and Candace Thompson and Nikki Christmas of the Juanita J. Craft Civil Rights House. Good afternoon, each of you, and welcome, and thank you for this series. For participating in this series. I wanted to give each of you opportunity to introduce yourselves, and because reading bio, who wants to read a bio? So each of you have an opportunity to introduce yourself and talk about your organizations. We'll take about 1 or 2 minutes for each of you to go through and do that. Why don't we begin with Mr. Callies, because he's right to my right. You're still muted. Gotta love Zoom. I think we all need t-shirts that say you're on mute. Well, I mean, we can keep it moving. Doreen, while Mr. Callies gets his mute unmuted, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, I will. Good morning, everyone. I'm Doreen Ravenscroft. I'm the president, actually, of Cultural Arts of Waco. One of our projects is public art. And early in 2006, we actually began a major project, which was the Chisholm Trail, which actually runs through Waco. And it was from that monumental sculpture that we were asked to consider if we would honor Waco's most important Black hero, and that is Doris Miller. There was obviously no thought, it was a huge yes. And in 2009, we started a major project to do the Doris Miller Memorial, which now sits proudly on the Brazos banks of the river Brazos. So,
thank you, Doreen. Mr. Callis, let's hear from you.
Hi, my name is Larry Callis. I used to be a country and western singer. George Strait's manager used to be my manager. I lost my voice, but I'm a Christian first and I'm a cowboy second. I know when God closes one door, he opens another one. He's opened this museum wide open. And God asked me to open this museum 5 years ago. And I'm going to tell you stories about the Black Cowboys here in Texas and where cowboys came from. And there's so much in this museum. I can't talk about it all the whole time.
We can't wait to hear from you and hear it. Sandra, how about you?
My name is Sandra Tumberlinson, and I am a founder of the Callandritt Black History Museum of South Texas in San Benito. Many people believe that the Rio Grande Valley is not a place where Blacks live or have lived, and so history tends to overlook us. But did you know that the Underground Railroad came right through here, and that Buffalo soldiers were stationed 30 miles away from here during the last battle of the Civil War? My goal is to educate the world about the place where I was born, an important place where history was made. This Callandritt Black History Museum is a good start.
Thank you. Louis, let's hear from you.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everybody, or good afternoon now. My name is Louis Padilla. I'm with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Buffalo Soldiers program. I've been a part of this program for 14 years now, approaching 15. And we are an education and outreach program that preserves the cultural histories that are the Buffalo Soldiers, their shared heritage with other races they shared their time with here in Texas. And of course, trying to bridge the gap between communities who don't normally recreate or use our state park facilities through histories of the Buffalo Soldiers and their experiences outdoors.
Thank you. And let's go with you, Candace, and then Nikki, if you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the Craft House.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candace Thompson. I am the board chair for the Friends of Juanita Craft House and Civil Rights Museum in Dallas, Texas. And so we started off by being a I would say a very passionate group of 20-something volunteers working on a steering committee, and we've recently formed into a friends group in support of preserving the legacy, the life, and the love, and continue on the great work of Miss Juanita Jewel Craft here in Dallas, Texas, and beyond.
And good afternoon. My name is Nikki Christmas. I am with the Office of Arts and Culture with the City of Dallas, where we own the Craft House, and Candace gave a great introduction on the group. So,
well, we appreciate each and every one of you for being here, and can't wait to dive into more information about your organization. So, why don't we start with, and we'll get ready because I know there are presentations and PowerPoints that accompany this. So why don't we begin with you, Doreen? Tell us about the Doris Miller Memorial and how you came to that, which I proudly say is in the Brazos Trail region.
Well, now you're seeing a picture of the Doris Miller Memorial. It came about really because of an amazing Baylor professor, Dr. Jerry Powell, who thought that once we'd got into public art, that the most important person in Waco for Black history was Doris Miller. But was his story really being told? We knew through some of our members in the community that plaques and memorials had been lost, and it seemed to me that the story for our organization was incredibly important and one that should be told. So we went about meeting with the city to see if they would designate some land for us. And we're very thrilled that the city of Waco designated 2.2 acres on the Brazos River at the junction of MLK Boulevard and Washington Avenue. The memorial stands not only to represent Doris Miller, but if you see in the background, there is an image of a ship's hull. It is actually a mathematical algorithm in that from the very smallest end, it's an algorithm that repeats itself mathematically to create this amazing stainless steel background, which is really a concept of one side of a ship's hull. But within the ship, in the design that Stan Carroll did, he said many sailors make a ship. So basically, even though there's not a piece of steel for every sailor, that the concept design represents the whole team of the West Virginia and the whole team of sailors on the Liscum Bay. So the memorial, it's still got some parts missing that are the educational part that are coming in bronze. They will be the story of Doris's life. First of all, that he was a young man from a family of sharecroppers. He had, and as he grew up, he wanted to do more, and he decided to join the Navy. But in those days, the only opportunity for a young African-American man was to be a messman. And as we know, the United States entered into World War II, and sadly, the US was bombed at Pearl Harbor, which really brought them into World War II. And it was Doris Miller's actions during the Pearl Harbor event that gave him the most acclaim. During that time, it was actually the Cleveland Courier that said, there is a Black man who we know has done something courageous, but no one knew his name. And finally, the Navy released the name Doris Miller from Waco, Texas. Even though his family's sharecropping farm, which is now covered by Lake Waco, was close to Spiegelville, and some of his family grew up in Riesel. But Waco is kind of the point that people always refer to. The young man who brought the captain to safety and then saved other lives, jumping into the water, saving other sailors from the burning oil, and most of all, of course, using a machine gun to spray the Japanese Air Force as they came in. And it's that story and his courage in doing that that makes him so important, because at that time, African Americans were not trained in the Navy to man any kind of machine gun at a battleship station. For us, and for it was really important that this is pointed out, and that also, even though Doris Miller lost his life in the sinking of the Liscum Bay in the Battle of the Gilbert Islands, he was actually unknowingly a leader in the civil rights movement, because the Navy began to understand that every person is valuable and every person can do their job. So the picture that you're seeing in the background now is Doris Miller, a stance that was chosen by the citizens of Waco and his family of coming home. Hands behind his back, every sailor as their ship comes into port mans the deck. And this is Doris Miller. It's 150% of life size, so it's 9 feet high in bronze. a bronze that was designed by Eddie Dixon, who is a sculptor from Lubbock, Texas, self-taught African-American, whose work is also in the Smithsonian and in the collection of Colin Powell. Doris Miller's eyes, the way he placed it, also look up at the American flag, which is at the opposite end of the memorial. What you see behind is the representation that Stan Carroll designed for us, in that the point of the ship is sailing out to sea, but the water is actually a reflection pool, and it honors every single sailor that passed away, that died, that gave their lives during that time. So, and that is particularly the Liscombe Bay, where over 900 sailors were lost, and of course the West Virginia. So we're looking at the memorial of not just Doris Miller, but also we wanted to say that every sailor makes a ship, and that it also memorializes his teams, his teammates as well, his sailors, his teammates. And as you can see, it just flows out. Hopefully at some point you can actually see both the water of the reflection pool and the Brazos River connecting together, even though they are separated. And so we're very proud that Waco and people all over the United States, including as far as away as Canada, supported the building of this memorial. We hope it's a place for reflection, a place for joy and happiness, and a place of learning, because what we have in the joy and happiness is young children playing football in the background, and we have young people creating concerts. It's meant to be just not a place that is a standing piece for one man, but also how we can all continue his life in some way with service to our country. I hope that explains the memorial. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Doreen. It's one of those things that we stop for a moment. I think when we did the dedication for that, one of the statements that were made was that when he woke up that morning, he woke up to do his job. Yes. He blessed the world by becoming a hero that day, but he woke up to do his job, and we're so glad that manning a gun is nothing for saving lives is nothing for a Texas man. We appreciate all the things that Doris Miller has done. Thank you again for sharing his story, not only with us today, but with the world in this amazing memorial.
And I also, if I may add one more thing,
yes,
the most amazing result of this in some way, that the aircraft carrier C1 is going to be named.
Yes.
The US Doris Miller, which is absolutely amazing. And we hope to see that launched in about 6 or 7 years, I think, before it actually sails in the early 30s, 2030 or so.
That was amazing news to receive, and I know that we Wacoans are incredibly proud of that, but also every Navy man in the world, man and woman in the world. So
every Navy man, yes. It's wonderful to visit the memorial, and you'll often see a Navy man sitting on the wall, and if you have the time, you take the time to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Sandra Tumberlinson with the Callandret Black History Museum. Sandra, tell us about this amazing facet in the Tropical Trail region.
A Black History Museum where? By the Mexican border in the Rio Grande Valley? Nah. Yep, it's true. And here's how and why it happened. When the Historical Society was offered $1 a year lease by the school district for the old colored school building, we were excited. Knowing the history of the building, we realized we could create a Black History Museum and take the old building back to its original look and purpose, a building for the education of only Black children. Next slide. So we renovated and set up the classroom the way it was 100 years ago in 1921. Every time men would come in to work on the building, they'd ask, what was this building used for? And I'd say, it was a school for Black children. What? They'd say. And I would rephrase it and say, it was a school where Black children from San Benito were taught. And they'd always ask, what do you mean? Or they'd say, I didn't know San Benito had Black people. Comments like these are some of the reasons why the San Benito Historical Society established the Callandritt Black History Museum. Next slide. Not only do we recognize and honor the city's past, its existence is important because the museum educates people about the pioneer Black families who lived in San Benito and whose contributions are still felt. Within 3 months of leasing the building, we opened. Linda Callandritt Brock, the baby in the picture being held by her grandmother, Fanny, lived to see it and attended the grand opening in February 2020, held just days before the country shut down due to COVID-19. Next slide. With this museum, we recognized that a group of people, unlike those around them, lived, loved, and made a difference in the world. Join me now as I tell you briefly about our hero of history, Joe Callandritt. Next slide. Mr. Jean-Marie Callandritt, or Joe as he was known, was a French and English-speaking Black Louisiana native who immigrated to San Benito in 1908, just 4 years after the town was founded. Why did he and his family come down here? Well, we speculate, based on his business dealings, that he discovered that there were land opportunities for someone not afraid of hard work, and he knew many of the town's white founders, several of whom had hit it big at Spindletop, and who were also from Louisiana. Next slide. Joe bought a large tract of land adjacent to the railroad tracks and farmed, started the first garbage collection company in town, bought and sold land, developed the Callandritt subdivision, and worked for the school district, which was incorporated a year after he and his family arrived. Because of Joe's success in South Texas, many friends and families followed him, and eventually there were about 25 Black families living in the same neighborhood. Next slide. Families have children. At that time, the schools were segregated by Hispanic and white, but not Black. So in 1921, after requests by the Black families in town, the school district opened a one-room wooden building by the railroad tracks and hired a certified Black teacher. Next slide. This school for Negro children was the first of its kind founded by a school district in all of the 20th century towns that sprang up after the railroad came down to the Rio Grande Valley in 1904. Next slide. When Joe Callandritt died in 1931, his life and reputation was confirmed by the engraving on his headstone. Joe Callandritt, an old-fashioned Louisiana Negro, erected by his friends and admirers of the Caucasian race. After his death, his wife and 6 children ran his estate, part of which is still in their possession. Next slide. The colored school continued until the 1933 Labor Day hurricane blew it away, and after which the children attended school in private homes, churches, and even the ice house across the street. There was little stability to their education, and enrollment fluctuated for years until Fanny Callandritt, Joe's wife, donated a couple of acres to the school district in 1949. In her words, so that her children, grandchildren, and other Black children would have a permanent school. The school district completed the new building in 1952, and now it's a museum. Next slide. Entering through the gift shop named Fancy's, panels on the wall highlight important national Black history events and Texas events, including the Underground Railroad, which crossed through the Rio Grande Valley, taking escaped Blacks to freedom in Mexico. Next slide. Next, you see a replica of the 1921 classroom It's furnished with antique desks, a piano, original windows, and other items similar to those in the photos we have of the actual school. Flanking the classroom are interpretive panels with the story of the Callandritt colored school, including a photo of one of the earliest teachers who later in her career had a school in Hidalgo County named in her honor. Next slide. In the final section of the museum, family trees of the major Black families are set in relation to each other, with the pictures of individuals color-coded to match their ancestry, completing the family stories. Next slide. Mr. Willie Earl Smith, a young man born and reared in San Benito, Texas, and who received his early education at the colored school, at this colored school, is featured prominently at the entrance to the media room. As head of security at the Austin Hilton, Willie met then Senator Obama during his presidential campaign and was invited to attend his second inauguration. It's amazing. A little boy who attended a one-room segregated school is recognized and honored by the President of the United States. And it all started in San Benito, Texas. Next slide. What's in our future? An oral histories booth where anyone, not just Black families, can tell their story for posterity. Conversion of the playground into a pet-friendly neighborhood park with the help of the San Benito Rotary Club. And expanding the building to be able to host national and state dignitaries, symposiums, and club events, not to mention family reunions. And we just recently had a funeral reception at the museum for a Callandritt descendant. Do you want to be a part of the biggest surprise in Texas? Come join us. We'd love to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing the story of the Callandritt Black History Museum. San Benito got a lot going on, and we can't wait to get down there to see it. I think it's important that we catalog and share the legacy, not only of this family, but of how many people it touched. So we appreciate you sharing your time with us this afternoon. Louis Padilla, let's talk about the Buffalo Soldiers.
All right, thank you, God, for having me. As stated earlier, we are an education and outreach program, of course, focusing on the magnificent and powerful history of the Buffalo Soldiers. The program was founded through TPWD, or Texas Parks and Wildlife, about 25 years ago by Mr. Ken Pollard. Some of you may know him. And since then has undergone several different changes, adapting our style of programming to continually reach newer audiences and connect those audiences to the outdoors. We do not necessarily have a home site other than the Austin headquarters, but we like to consider the entire state of Texas our site. Doing Buffalo Soldier history, we tend to fall back on our heritage trail roots and identify the history and the culture that happened within the many civilian or military trails throughout Texas that 9 times out of 10 go either directly through a state park or historic site, or traditionally within 100 miles of that state park or historic site. Within our program, we offer several different styles of program. Again, part of that whole evolution of our program. And as you can see here in this picture, this would be considered our standard education or tabletop programming, where we discuss what is a Buffalo Soldier, how did the African-American men of the military receive the name Buffalo Soldier, and then more importantly, what was their life like? Many of times when you go to a living history events or a reenactment, you're seeing battles, you're seeing specific moments in time. And within our program, we tend to focus more on the experience of the man or the woman out on the frontier. How can we connect the lives of these trailblazing men and women 150 plus years ago to your lifestyles today? What can transfer over, and how can we encourage you to live these healthy, happy lifestyles outside? Next slide. Color guard presentations is also another big part of our program. And this is a really good opportunity for our program to get a lot of youth involved. We have volunteers across the entire state of Texas. And in this picture, we have 3 volunteers, one of our older gentlemen volunteers, and then 2 young volunteers that have been with us for at least 3 years now. But you can find us down at the Capitol, posting the colors for Texas Independence Day or any other special events that they have. Many of times we've partnered up with THC and done color guards for them. And then just with different community organizations and nonprofits, we're able to conduct color guard and hopefully use that as an avenue to spark some interest within our program, our history, and our shared heritage here in Texas. Next slide. Blazing New Trails is another program that we have under our umbrella. And this program consists, of course, of the rich history of the Buffalo Soldiers. But within Blazing New Trail programs, you'll get the opportunity to actually engage in that history and take a part in it hands first. In this picture, you see us playing a game called Trap Ball. And no, the Buffalo Soldiers never played a game called Trap Ball, but we were involved in baseball. Early baseball has a lot of history with the Buffalo Soldiers, especially here in Texas, down at Fort McCavitt. So a lot of the times we'll try to engage in an old school game of baseball, but we are a state agency and we understand liability and risk. So with trap ball, it's a lot easier and a lot safer. And it gets people engaged outdoors in non-traditional ways of recreation. You know, not everybody we come across may be a camper or a fisher or like hiking down trails. We may have a large population that would rather partake in sporting activities. And fortunately for us, we were able to connect the dots and interfuse Buffalo Soldier history with baseball and encourage that outdoor participation. Within Blazing New Trails, we also do programs such as cane pole fishing, teaching the basics of orienteering, which goes along the lines of surveying the frontier that the soldiers would have done. We have animal tracking programs that will teach the basics of animal identification and most importantly, how to stay safe and respectful of those animals within our outdoor spaces. And bike rides. The Iron Riders is a rich history of the Buffalo Soldiers. It did not take place in Texas. But again, that heritage and that lineage of the Buffalo Soldiers extended into an outdoor activity that we have today. So we choose to honor that history and use that as a vehicle to, again, increase participation or at least spark interest in participating in outdoor recreation activities. Next slide. Here is a picture of one of our soldiers, Private Mac. Again, during our tabletop style programming or our basic education programs, we offer these in schools from elementary up through colleges, as well as state parks and historic sites and just general community venues with rec centers or nonprofit organizations. And again, it's a way to get people engaged. We try not to necessarily lecture the entire time we're at one of these programs. You'll get the opportunity to view artifacts, sometimes handle some of the reproduction artifacts. You might even get to try on one of our uniforms, adults and youth, just to get the full experience of what it was like outdoors in the Army blue wool. Next slide. Again, we've done a lot of programming with museums across Texas. This one happens to be with the Institute of Texan Cultures. And we absolutely enjoy the opportunities that we have to educate, and we consistently try to find avenues to get people other avenues in learning the history along us. So for example, in this picture, this would be a tie into archaeology. If history is not your thing and maybe archaeology is your thing, which it's basically ties into each other. This is an activity that highlights Fort Richardson and the Buffalo Soldiers' rich history there. We talk about the importance of leaving items where they're at so that we can have the proper authorities find them, preserve that story, and continue to share that story. Next slide. And like, as I spoke of with the Iron Riders program, this is an example of our guided bike rides. It's pretty hard riding an old school bike in a wool uniform. So this is why you see us on a modern bike here. But these are really fun activities that we do with the public. This one, I believe, was done at Lake Mineral Wells State Park. And we've completed roughly 3 bike rides now, one down in South Texas, one at Mineral Wells, and the other here in Central Texas at Fisher State Park. Again, it highlights the heritage and the history of the Buffalo Soldiers and provides an outdoor experience for people to hopefully lock away for a long time, never forget that experience, and really promote that experience to others, whether friends, family, or their professional network. I think that might be my last slide.
We want to thank you for sharing this information and history. So a lot of people don't realize the impact that the Buffalo Soldiers had throughout the West, but especially in the Southwest and Texas. And I am glad that there is an opportunity for us to continue to learn the impact that was made and felt by these men who mounted up and did their part to keep Texas and Texans safe. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Callies, let's talk about
Yes.
the Black Cowboys.
The Black Cowboys. All right. I want to thank you for having me. I apologize for my voice. Like I say, I used to be a country and western singer. I lost my voice, but God has given me something different. He's given me this museum. He asked me to open this museum 3 years ago. And when I did, I asked God, I said, why do you want me to open up the museum? I can barely talk. He said, have faith. And that I know more about cowboys than I thought I did. Well, when I opened up the museum, I saw a picture with the Black Cowboys from 1880. I'd been told we were called cowboys because we were the slaves on the ranch. When you had a houseboy, a yard boy, and somebody worked the cows, he was called a cowboy. And that's where the word cowboy came from. And when I found this out, I wanted to have this museum. And God has opened this door so wide that I've had relatives in these books that I've been reading on my father's side took the longest trail drive to Wyoming. And on my mother's side, they took cattle from here to Wyoming. That's how far I go back. It was one of the best cowboys in the state of Texas. And I'm sorry I don't have any pictures for you. My internet's about to disconnect. But anyway, before it disconnect, I tell people about the Black Cowboys, how they formed and what they did and why they were called cowboys. And they did so much for the United States. If you look in the history book, you would see that if you saw 20 cowboys, 17 of them were white. That's not the truth. If you saw 20 cowboys back in the 1800s, all of them were black and one was white. And he was the one that owned the cowboys because the word cowboy came from slaves. And when Hollywood heard about the cowboys, They thought they were talking about white cowboys. They were talking about the Black Cowboys, so they put them on TV. And they used a person by the name of Bass Reeves you ever heard of the Lone Ranger? Well, the Lone Ranger was really black. And just about every cowboy you saw on TV, the white cowboys, they were imitating black cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Wide Earp, they imitated a black cowboy, and his name was Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was a marshal in the 1800s. He was born 1838. He hit his master when he was 15. He stole the master's horse and he rode to Oklahoma. He got in with the Indians. When he got in with the Indians, they taught him how to shoot, fight, track, everything. And then when slavery was over in 1865, he went to the hanging judge, Judge Parker. And Judge Parker told him, he said, to be a U.S. Marshal, you have to know how to read and write. He said, I can't do either one. He said, but I got a good memory. Judge Parker said, okay, we'll try you out. He said, go get these 5 people. He named them all. They were the worst cowboys or bad cowboys in the world. He said, you had too much to get them. You can bring them back dead or alive. Bass Reeves didn't like killing people. He brought all 5 of them back within 3 weeks. And they made him a U.S. Marshal. He captured 3,000 convicts in his lifetime. So they started talking about him. They started writing about him. They started telling stories about him. One person got on the radio and said, I'm going to tell you the story of the Lone Ranger. Now, that was in 1933. They didn't have TV. They had a radio. And he said, the Lone Ranger rides again. And he'd do this like a horse was in the studio. And people really listened to him. He had 1,000 people listening to him on the radio. I mean, hundreds of thousands. And somebody said, oh, it was a black man. He didn't know any better. Well, he had thousands of phone calls saying they wouldn't listen to his radio station. And he said, why? He said, because you said the Lone Ranger was a black man. He didn't want to lose his audience. He said, no. He said, he wore a black mask. So when in the 1950s, they put him on the radio, on TV, and he had to be a white man with a black mask. So that tells you that they wouldn't put us on TV because we wouldn't be accepted. If we wasn't going to be accepted on the radio, we sure wasn't going to be accepted on the TV. And that's how they wrote off a bunch of black cowboys. Now, I had uncles that were champions in rodeos. My dad was a champion in rodeos, my cousins. I've even gone all the way back to the first people that drove cattle to Wyoming. And I have a book here. It's called The Black Cowboys of Texas. Mm-hmm. I have a cousin named Clarence Gonzalez. He's in this book. He's a son or grandson of Charlie Willis. And I'm kin to Clarence Gonzalez, so I'm kin to Charlie Willis. He was a singing cowboy. And guess what? I used to be a singing cowboy. I used to sing '80s to the '90s. And that's why I opened this museum, is to tell people where cowboys came from. I tell them where the Longhorns came from. The Watusi. Spain mixed their cows with the Watusi, and that's where they got the cows from. Guess who the first cowboys were? They were Africans. Back in 700, the Moorish Africans attacked Spain and took over Spain. They invented the saddle. They invented the bridles. And Spain brought them over in 1492 with Christopher Columbus. He brought the horses over here. He also brought the longhorns that originally came from Africa. And there's so much history here at this museum. And I would like for, if y'all have a chance to come by and see this museum. I'm sorry I didn't have any pictures. I kind of just started this museum, but this is the story of the Black Cowboy. And like I said, the Black Cowboy came from right here in Fort Bend County.
Oh, yes.
We appreciate you, Mr. Callis, and we will be sure to send folks. There was one of the things that said, where was the Cowboy Museum located? It's in Rosenberg, is that right?
It's at 1104 3rd Street in Rosenberg, Texas.
Shout out to the Independence Trail.
You can look me up on the internet.
Thank you so much, Mr. Callis. And I know I think there's some questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them in just a minute. But we want to wrap up and share some information with our last presenters, Ms. Candace Thompson and Ms. Nikki Christmas with the Juanita J. Craft Civil Rights House. Good afternoon. Let's hear from you.
Good afternoon. And so I'm so grateful to have Nikki as a tag team partner in this. So as stated, my name is Candace Thompson and represent the Friends group for the Friends of Juanita Craft House and Civil Rights Museum. And for those of you who do not know Mrs. Craft, I'm going to give you just a little bit of history, but she is an African-American woman who had a great vision for the work that she was doing in Dallas and abroad. But she made sure that her work impacted many across, it was youth, it was adults, it was families, it was all citizens. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. And this is her home, which is located at 2618 Warren Avenue in Dallas, Texas, where a lot of her work happened. Her work was in her home for the most part, and that was making change across the nation in this space and making it a place where youth are able to gather. Particularly, she worked closely with the NAACP Youth Council. She started several youth councils throughout the state and worked collaboratively with other female leaders in the civil rights movement. And she purchased this home in 1950, May 16th, 1950, in a time when Dallas was not yet really fully ready for integration. But she, along with a couple of other Black families, worked to integrate the neighborhood. And while she was doing that, she made much change happen and entertained many leaders of this great nation in her home with her food. With her crafts. Her last name is Craft, but she was very crafty, and she developed several relationships in her work. So we, as the steering committee, started working with the city of Dallas. That was in 2018. And we've recently formed our Friends group, but much has happened. And Nikki, would you like to just kind of give an update in regards to the house and what's going on right now, and then we'll pick back up.
Sure. Thank you, Candace. So Mrs. Craft's home kind of served, served as a gathering spot for extensive array of civil rights activities from 1950 to 1985, like Candace said. Next slide, please. And in 2018, there was kind of a catastrophic flood in the home right as the community efforts began to make improvements to develop programming for the house. So there is, behind the big house is a little house that where Ms. Craft resided, and she provided the big house to boarders visiting Dallas. That it received improvements in 2019. In April 2019, all of the historical elements from the home here were removed. And at that time, we did abatement of the asbestos and mold remediation, and that work has been completed. So city owns the home, and we have owned it since the death of Mrs. Craft in 1985. And it is under the purview of our South Dallas Cultural Center, which is a part of our Office of Arts and Culture. Next slide, please. So as Candace mentioned, we are in the process of restoring the home so that our guests and visitors are able to come and view the home and learn about Mrs. Craft and her history. We have many partners, which one being the Friends Group with the city, as well as the Junior League of Dallas. They have named the restoration project as their centennial anniversary project as we enter their centennial year. And we are doing a lot of fundraising to help restore the home. We are almost to our goal. This picture here that you're seeing is a picture of Mrs. Craft's kitchen with her kitchen table that sat several activists that we have known. One story is of Thurgood Marshall. Also there you can see her jams and jellies that she had there. And some of those are from when Mrs. Craft was living as well. So next slide, please.
And I did want to make note, Nikki, is that, Ms. Craft is known to have said, "It is my hope that after I am gone, people of all backgrounds will visit my house and come to understand that individuals can make a difference and to appreciate the importance of service to community and nation. You don't have to be rich to make an impact, but you have to work and you have to care." And that's what she said in 1985, prior to her death. And along with the house, our goals are to restore the home, to develop it into a full service education museum. And again, that is for children and it's for adults, that we want people to be transformed when they cross over the threshold of her home. When you come in, you feel a sense of renewal, you feel a sense of purpose. And when you walk out of the door, you know that you are no longer the same person that you were when you walked in. And also our goal is to add her home to to be registered as a site along the Civil Rights Trail additionally. Okay, and Nikki.
Well, I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you. No, we appreciate this is amazing history. And what I have appreciated in this journey as we walk along our Heroes of Texas is that these paths cross because we are all interwoven and our histories are so interconnected. This last picture of her purse and this pocketbook with this sticker says "Pay your poll tax." I have my grandparents' poll tax receipts, so that was one of those things that always. And the first time I voted, I carried it with me because what I could do freely, so many had to work so hard to be able to do, fought, bled, and died to be able to do. So honoring the fact that, using her craft, literally and figuratively, we were able to advance the movement in Dallas and make those impacts, doing what we were brought here to do and forcibly brought here to do, but advanced in our own way and culture. The Black Cowboys have evolved, were a humongous part of Texas lore and history, and continue to advance into what was military service in our Buffalo Soldiers, and all that we come from far and wide. So that you were in the valley down in San Benito is just evidence that there's not a place in Texas that we don't touch. And bringing it from there to Waco, we get an opportunity to share the history and legacy of a mess hall cook who decided today was not going to be the day that ship went down and got on that gun and did his job. You all are amazing carriers of this legacy and continuers of this legacy and history. And I do want to give people an opportunity to know how to reach you. And so we have a few questions. I think most of them have been answered. If not, I'll go through and pull some. But while I'm pulling questions, let's go and make sure you tell people how to reach you and how, you know, and because, well, my one question is, you know, how have you pivoted with the pandemic? What are the hours that you're keeping? Are you still able to do the things that you were doing? If not, how have you changed? So we've got about 6 minutes till we wrap, but I wanted to make sure that people know, one, you know, how to see you and how to learn more about, because we've gotten so many comments and accolades about this information, and they want to know more. So let's make sure we have the ability to give them more. So Ms. Tumberlinson, let's hear from you and about your hours. And I saw that you did put your information up, but if you wouldn't mind just giving it again. You're muted. You're muted.
CallandritMuseum.com is our website. We are open 3 days a week right now because of limited funds. We're open Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday from 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, or by special appointment. We'll open anytime you want to come over and visit, and just call and we can take care of that. No problem.
Thank you. Mr. Callies, give us the information about the Black Cowboy Museum and how to reach you.
Black Cowboy Museum. All you have to do is look up the Black Cowboy Museum. I'm the only one in the world. And just look it up on the internet, and I'm the only one that'll pop up.
I love it.
And it'll tell you everything about my museum. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Can't wait to get down there when we're moving again. Doreen, tell me about the Doris Miller Museum.
We have
Memorial.
The Doris Miller Memorial.org. And if you need to reach me, it's Doreen at WacoArtsFest.org. And if anyone wants me to come and talk with them down at the memorial, I'm 2 minutes away. And the memorial is open 24/7 because it's in a public park.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson.
Certainly. So right now we are an active construction site. So you cannot come visit us just yet. However, we would love everyone to come and visit us next spring when we officially reopen and relaunch. And so all are invited. Invite your friends, your families, your cousins. But you can connect with us on our website at www.juanitacrafthouse.org, or you can also send us an email at connect@juanitacrafthouse.org. All right, thank you.
Anything you want to add, Miss Christmas?
Oh, yes, we do. We want to make sure, because I saw that there was a question about the craft kids. I'm sorry, Nikki.
No, it's fine.
Kids. Yes, we are still looking to reunite with all of the craft kids, because we know that Mrs. Craft touched the lives of many youth across the state of Texas and outside of Texas, and many of them reside outside of the state of Texas. So if any of you are craft kids, please reach out to us directly. Like I said, at the website, it's connect@juanitacrafthouse.org. We want to connect with you. So thank you.
And thank you to the city of Dallas for the work that they do in supporting this project. Mr. Padilla.
It's very easy to reach the Buffalo Soldiers, myself or my staff members. Simply start a fire and start making smoke signals. No, I'm playing. Throughout the pandemic, we've had to pivot just like everybody else has. And I'm fortunate enough to serve on an amazing team here in state parks that we've easily knocked out 60 or 70 virtual programs since the start of the pandemic. You can catch those now on our Facebook page. That one is facebook.com/Texas Buffalo Soldier Program. And we're running a free virtual series entitled Buffalo Soldier University that culminates at the end of February, the 27th, I believe, the last Saturday. with a free trivia Kahoot game on the content that we're delivering throughout Black History Month. Aside from that, if you're looking to contact me, I've left my email in the comment box, and I've responded to a few people who have asked a direct question. But my email address is probably best, and that is, it's a long one. It's luis.padilla@tpwd.texas, all spelled out, .gov. And I'd be more than happy to talk to you all to see how we can partner, how we can get you involved in volunteering, and how we can help execute some in-person or some virtual programs for you.
Well, we are so grateful to have had this opportunity to hear from each and every one of you. There are so many stories of Black heroes to tell, Black Texas heroes to tell, and there's simply not enough hours in the day to tell them. But we do want to thank Texas Historical Commission for this series. Please follow their social media, as they will do more information and more slides and posts on Texas heroes of Black history. We want to really thank again our speakers, Mr. Larry Callies, Ms. Sandra Tumberlinson, Ms. Nikki Christmas, Ms. Candace Thompson, Ms. Doreen Ravenscroft, Mr. Luis Padilla, for their time, talent, and treasure. It is so impactful that they share their stories of Texans with us. If you want to get information on future presentations by the Texas Historical Commission, please visit thc.texas.gov and click sign up for email updates. Thank you again for sharing this time with us for this webinar, and we'll see you next time. I'm Andrea Barefield.